Good morning. I'm here with our executive editor, Liz Farrell, and we're going to be digging in on the Bowen Turner case into the judge and the prosecutor who were behind this very controversial decision. If you're unfamiliar with the Bowen Turner case, it's something that will enrage you once you learn about it. So I'm going to provide you with that link right there. You can click that video, and that goes more into the backstory. But Liz and I are going to get started right away talking a little bit about the judge and the prosecutor. So would you like to lead us in with Judge Dennis?
Yeah, so Judge Markley Dennis is a longtime judge. He's been around since 1994. That was when he was first elected a judge in South Carolina. And right now he's an at-large judge, which means I think that he can sort of bounce around. But from what I've seen, it seems like he mostly sticks to Charleston County. And he is retired. And what we are hearing from our sources is that judges who are retired are, double dipping. So they're getting their salary for what they're doing now, plus their retirement salary. So that's, a pretty good deal. But there's also even less accountability. They sort of do what they want. Not that they really weren't anyway, but there's sort of less accountability and less control. It's sort of the Wild West, I guess, when it comes to judges, the ones that are retired and returned. So Judge Markley has a really interesting career. And one thing I'll note is that, a lot of my research was done through old newspapers and sort of, old news accounts of what was happening. This guy had thousands of cases, I'm sure. And the ones that make it in the newspaper are not always, obviously going to be, his average everyday case. So it kind of can provide like a skewed view of what someone's career looks like. So I just want to put that out there first. But I will say that, this is not new. This is something that he has a lot of experience in, which is getting criticized for his sentencing. So in Bowen Turner's case, as you know, he was and just to remind people, he was, accused of raping 3 girls from 3 different counties at 3 different times. The first case ended with either a dismissed charge or no charge. We don't know. The second case, the victim passed away while she was awaiting her trial. So it was like 3 years after the incident that she passed away. So the case had been delayed that much. So that charge got dismissed. And then the third charge got reduced to assault and battery first degree. So Judge Markley gave him a 5-year sentence of probation, and he does not have to register as a sex offender if he sticks to the rules during the 5 years. So, I think the argument we're going to hear from prosecutors and judges out there is that that's an appropriate sentence for that charge, and that might actually well be. But obviously the issue is that Bowen had hired a powerful state senator, and that relationship to represent him, and that relationship between state senators and judges is such that the guy who's ruling on their cases is put into his position by the guy who's making the arguments. So it's essentially, we have a system where lawyers are choosing their judges in some cases. So that's where this whole situation sort of fraught, right? So there's, the story that's happening here, and then you have the drama that's happening behind the scenes, which is that, these weird relationships. So, in the case of Judge Markley Dennis, he's retired and returned. Does he really care whether, Brad Hutto, State Senator Brad Hutto, the attorney, can, not re-up his next term? I don't know. But certainly he's going to have a relationship of trust where, he figures that what he's hearing is the truth of the situation, and this is an appropriate sentence. So that said, I'm just putting that on the table because this stuff is so fraught that it's important that we just, sort of level it. But looking back at this guy's career, he, as I was just looking up it recently, in 2018, 2019 in Charleston County, 46 murder suspects were granted bond. And in 80% of those cases, Judge Markley Dennis was the judge in the case. Just want to pause while that's, sorry. So yeah, 80% of those cases were Judge Markley Dennis's. So that's just sort of goes along with a topic of conversation that we've been having a lot, which is, these sort of heinous crimes and guys getting let out on bond. And then what's the recidivism, like the almost immediate. And in Bowen Turner's case, as you know, he was out on bond. He had just had his ankle monitor removed. And 41 days later, he was accused of sexually assaulting another girl. So, that is certainly important to consider when you're looking at somebody's career. Like, how do they treat, defendants who are awaiting their trial? So, Judge Markley Dennis gives, I would say, male defendants the benefit of the doubt, and he seems like a guy who really truly believes in rehabilitation, the idea that, I want to give somebody a chance to do the right thing and to improve their life. And that seems to be the trend when I look at, the cases that he was presiding over since 1994. And a couple of those cases, drew so much controversy, though. In 1995, there was a father who was accused of paying his 14-year-old daughter to have sex with her, and he had been having sex with her since she was 5 years old. And he was sentenced to 10 years suspended to probation. And he was supposed to go get therapy in lieu of prison, basically. And what happened was, the newspaper wrote the story and readers read it and were outraged. So they started writing in letters and calling in and saying, this is an outrage. This is not, what our judges should be doing. And instead, this prosecutor, she wrote an op-ed in defense of the judge, which was interesting, basically saying that, you don't know what you're talking about out there. This is an appropriate sentence. I even think she said the victim did not want her father to go to prison, which, she's 14 years old, and certainly, loves her father, I'm sure, but that's not for a 14-year-old to decide. That's for a judge to decide. And he decided on therapy. And unfortunately, we don't know the outcome of that. But, obviously, it's a very shocking one. But when you look at even just, animal abuse cases, cases in particular, and this is not anything special with Judge Markley Dennis, it's, cases where the defendant had a private attorney, had hired a defense attorney versus, a public defender. So here's a really good example. I think it was in 1997. There was a case in which a 23-year-old man had a 15-year-old girlfriend, and she got pregnant. And obviously, that is not the age of consent. So he was African-American, she was white. He ends up getting arrested for this. And Judge Markley Dennis, I keep calling him by his first and last name, and I'm not really sure why. Judge Dennis, he, maybe because his last name sounds like a first name and his first name sounds like a last name.
Flip him around.
Yeah, exactly. So Judge Dennis, he was so distraught while going to sentence this guy that he said he needed to take a break, because he wanted to make sure that he was sentencing him as a judge and not as a father. And he said, I believe the relationship was consensual, but she was 15. So if you listen to that for a second, I believe the relationship was consensual, but she's 15. And in the case of, Bowen Turner, obviously, we're not talking about consent here. And we are talking about, 16-year-old girls here. It's an interesting sort of flip, right? But, again, Judge Dennis can only go with what's put in front of him. The sentencing recommendation, the facts of the case, the plea deal that the prosecutor has agreed to with the defense attorney. So, the question of whether, a bond revocation motion was not even apparently put in front of him to consider. So the fact that this was supposed to be a bond revocation hearing and it turned into a plea deal, again, he can only do what is in front of him. So I'm not, necessarily blaming him for that. But yeah, certainly he is a judge who is known for, lighter sentences. He's not somebody who's known as a victim-friendly judge. On top of that, there's this other case that's super interesting. It was in the late 90s, in 2000, I think is when the sentencing occurred, but there was this massive embezzlement happening in Sumter County in the school district. And it was an assistant superintendent who had embezzled millions of dollars, and he was giving the millions of dollars in part to staff members as bonuses and these sort of like fancy trips all over the place, and even hiring like escorts and that kind of stuff. So one of the staff members who got caught up in this was a very popular football coach. And, he stole, and I say stole, he benefited from, took money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And Judge Dennis sentenced him. He was looking at 25 years. He gave him 10 years, suspended to 90 days. So this guy was only going to have to go to jail for 90 days. And he was only going to have to pay back $45,000. So this again was a complete outrage. People lost their minds because when you looked at the full scope of the defendants, I think there were like 5 of them. The only one who got more than, the 90 days, other than the guy who this was his whole scheme, was an assistant principal who was African-American, and he got a longer sentence and had to pay back more money. So because of the outrage, he was asked, kind of like in this case, he was asked to reconsider his sentencing. And certainly he did not do that. And then later it came out that he knew Coach Lewis, that they were familiar with each other. So then the question of why didn't he recuse himself? And then it came out again, I think it was like 6 years later, that Tom Lewis, the coach, hadn't even paid back the $45,000 that he was supposed to have paid back. So it kind of gave you, a look at just like the consequences of those decisions. But again, you can only do what's put in front of you. And I guess that leads us to talk about the prosecutor, David Miller, who is the one who would have put that in front of the judge. So I will talk about him now. He's a longtime prosecutor. He has got a very solid career. It looks like he has been, he got the Ernest Hollings, I think, award. I can't remember, but he got a very high honor when it comes to prosecutors in the state of South Carolina. He is well regarded, and it seems like, just from looking at his, the scope of his career, he takes himself very seriously. He's taken very seriously. But in this case, you have somebody who's been trying to be a judge since 2012. And I don't know, where that stands for him currently. I don't know if he is continuing, wanting to be a judge, but yeah, you have somebody. So let's just look at the characters in front of the judge here. Well, let's look at the judge. So you have a judge who's known for, more lenient sentences for defendants. And you have a judge, and I didn't mention this, but like I said, he is usually in Charleston. He has only been in Orangeburg County twice since 2013, and this would be the second time. So he isn't normally there. This is, not normally his circuit. So the fact that he was there, it's almost, you have to ask yourself, were they judge shopping? Is this just, a coincidence that the guy who is known for being friendly to defendants is in town that week? So you have that. You have State Senator Brad Hutto, who is a longtime powerful senator who is representing the accused. And then you have, who also has a voice in who becomes judges in our state. And then you have the prosecutor, who has been trying to be a judge for a very long time. And so you take those 3 things, and that's where you start asking questions, right? That's when you start looking at it and you're like, well, I don't think this is how the outcome would be for anyone else in that same set of circumstances without those, without having, a state senator legislature as your attorney. But take that apart and you look at, this is sort of the perfect storm for this outcome, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's kind of like you need to compromise multiple legs for the stool to fall over.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's interesting that we are talking about this. I think, I'm just going to say that I feel like people have been sort of missing the point. I don't know if that's your experience and seeing comments out there. But this isn't necessarily about Bowen Turner's guilt or innocence. The evidence very well weight, like, obviously they have to look at the evidence, they have to weigh that, and there's a certain amount of trust that you have to put in your justice system, right? Like, this is they have obviously access to information that the rest of us don't have right now, when it comes to the evidence, when it comes to what they think a jury or how a jury would respond, right? But that's not really the issue. The issue is, you have on March 2nd, you have the prosecutor finding out that Bowen Turner had violated the terms of a court order from 2020, in which he was not to leave his house except under a very explicit set of circumstances. He violated that, upward of 60 times within a couple of months. And the judge's order from 2020 said, if this guy violates this once, go get him, go put him in jail, and he can wait there for his bond hearing. And instead, what happened is a hearing got scheduled. This kid was not arrested. More than a month goes by. The hearing date is, April 8th. So it's over a month later, still not arrested. And then he shows up for, what the rest of the world thinks, I guess, is a bond revocation hearing. But, within a couple of days beforehand, suddenly becomes a plea deal hearing. So he avoided jail. So I think the thing that I want people to understand is that when it suited Bowen Turner, when it suited State Senator Brad Hutto, they were able to delay that case for as long as they wanted to, right? They just kept delay. That's the tactic. In the meantime, you have a victim who passes away, which is ideal circumstances for a defendant, frankly, because that charge ended up getting dropped, right? But then when it suited him he didn't, not to spend any time in jail because he had violated this judge's order, suddenly they have a plea deal in the works, right? So he doesn't have to spend any time behind bars. And that's what his family ostensibly was paying for in hiring State Senator Brad Hutto. That's what you're paying for. That's what that is what you were purchasing. You were purchasing that sort of power to keep your kid from behind bars.
You're purchasing privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to keep looking into that, just as far as like, what are the circumstances under which State Senator Brad Hutto was the attorney? Was he privately hired? Was he working, in any way with the public defender's office? How did that work? So yeah, we're going to be looking into that more.
So justice is supposed to be blind and holding a scale, but really it's got its eyes wide open and it's holding its hand out looking for a stack of hundreds.
Yeah, it's got its wallet, open, and
Right.
and another thing, it has to happen behind closed doors, right? There's a reporter who said that she wasn't allowed in the courtroom, and a courtroom is a public venue, and there's no argument to be made, in my opinion, as to why she shouldn't have been in there, why the public should not have been allowed, other than, they didn't want the criticism, they didn't want any sort of, pushback. So yeah, it's unfortunate.
It seems as if this is widespread and that we haven't learned, but I think that, just judging by what I've been seeing as far as people on Twitter, on Facebook,
right,
there are more people that are waking up to this as it happens again and again. So hopefully we can continue to draw attention to it and maybe put some pressure on the people in power to make meaningful change. Now, maybe that's me being overly optimistic, but that's what I have to tell myself when, I get up in the morning, or else I'm going to feel like I'm Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill.
Right, Sisyphus, yeah. But, it's not even just about like, okay, we got to fix the system, because that sounds like maybe overly optimistic to people's ears, but the less convenient we can make it for people. And then when I say we, I don't just mean in media, I mean people in South Carolina, like the less convenient that you can make it for people to operate under, this set of very specific circumstances that help a very specific set of people. I think that's really good. I think, conversations like this one, Stories like what we're doing at Fitsnews, those are so important, and it's really important for people to speak up and express their opinion, and obviously to vote, very important. That's the only way. I mean, we're never probably going to get rid of this kind of patronage system, but the less convenient you can make for them, I think the better. This is very inconvenient for Judge Dennis and Brad Hutto and David Miller right now.
Right. And Mandy just tweeted this morning, Brad Hutto's second birthday party got covered in the local newspaper. And, I'm not saying that that's not something that incriminates you or means that you're a bad person, but it shows you where he's coming from. And Judge Dennis, Rembert C. Dennis building, I worked in that building on the State House grounds. So, these people are very connected, and they have been for generations. And it's unfortunate that these people who are very connected, who have these family roots, who go back, forever in South Carolina. And if you live in South Carolina, you know that there's a lot of people who have those kinds of roots, not necessarily rich people, not necessarily powerful people, but people who have this, network of connections of people from the state.
Yeah.
They just cannot continue to get preferential treatment in the justice system. If you want to help your friends out getting a job, that's one thing. But when it comes to you've been accused of committing the most heinous of crimes, you just cannot let that system be what dictates the kind of justice you receive.
Yeah, sorry. This is the way to keep him quiet.
He looks like he's having a good time.
Yeah, he's having a great time. But yeah, what you were just saying, people joke and say that Brad Hutto is the Prince of Orangeburg County. And a look at, the Times and Democrat coverage starting in 1959. You see that he really actually was the Prince of Orangeburg County. Literally, I think he was like in a pageant where he got crowned, but that guy got a lot of, this is the thing, like the difference between the Murdaugh case and Brad Hutto in general, or I like Murdaugh and Brad Hutto, there's a lot of differences. But the number one thing is, Brad Hutto is a smart guy and looks like he studied hard and he put the work in. He's top of his class. He was valedictorian. He was a Cub Scout. He was an Eagle Scout. He was, I don't know the name of it, but there's some sort of organization that he was involved in, that's a service organization. And he went to Georgetown Law. I mean, this is not, this is not a guy who.
If you look at the schemes that Alex pulled, I mean, he was an idiot. An absolute idiot. Whereas Hutto is actually a respectable, intelligent person. Yes. He just happens to be leveraging his position of power to make money.
Right, exactly. And that's the problem. And he's not doing anything differently from what, other attorney legislators are doing. That's kind of the point, right? He's done a lot of good for the state. It doesn't, and these are not, black and white issues, in the sense that, we can't say something is all bad and all good.
Right. Dick Harpoon's done a lot of good for the state. As much as we bash him, 7 days a week, he's done some things that I really agree with.
Right. Exactly. So,
by the way, not the 5 Points bar closings, not that. My Carolina friends out there.
I've never been to 5 Points. Actually,
you're not missing too much, but
no, it doesn't sound like it.
The libertarian in me hates the fact that he just smashed a bunch of private businesses because kids like to get drunk.
Well, yeah,
they're still going to be getting drunk. I don't know if you've ever been to the University of South Carolina.
Exactly, it's the business owners who will be losing out though, but they'll find a way.
Oh, they will.
The water runs where it goes, But yeah, that's basically the long and short of it. I think that it's just important that we keep. Obviously, principally, we believe that everyone deserves a defense. That is constitutional right. That is we want that in our justice system. We want people to get good defenses because you're innocent until proven guilty. You are, that is what makes the system good, and it's what it makes it work. But the question then becomes like, what was your defense of him? Like, was it that, or was it that you were Brad Hutto? And was it that your prosecutor is ambitious and wants to be a judge? And I don't want to assign that to David Miller because we certainly don't know his motivation. But the other thing you can look at is that prosecutors have huge backlogs, and is this just an expedient way to check a box and say I've weighed my options here, I've weighed the outcomes, and this is the best possible outcome I can think of. And maybe that is the case, but what we're saying is that that's an awfully suspicious group, and an awfully suspicious outcome when you put it all together in one, puzzle box.
Yeah. And what we have to think about, whether it's expediency or whether it's leveraging power, there's a lot of victims that are left behind here. And, we can call them
Yes.
alleged victims so that we don't get sued, but there are a lot of people whose lives have been altered in a
Forever.
very serious way.
Yes, very serious.
And they do not feel like they've gotten justice, having
They
spoken with a
haven't.
lot of these people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They haven't. And the other thing to note too, we would not be having this conversation if it weren't for the bravery of the families and for Chloe to speak out like that. And that is not easy. And that is not something that they're, I would imagine doing lightly. And the fact that they're saying, just look at the fact that they're talking out the way they're talking out. They've had enough, and they're doing this so that future victims don't have to go through what they went through. They're trying to make the system better. And, I hope that this is these conversations and their bravery and all of this is maybe, maybe we're walking through a new threshold for a better future.
And this would be an appropriate time to do it. It's Sexual Assault Awareness Month right now.
Yeah, and we're aware.
Yeah, we are very aware.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Liz. I hope that
No
this
problem.
conversation was insightful to people who might be looking to get a little bit more of the context about, the pattern of 80% of the people who are let out on bond for being accused of murder from one judge. That speaks to a pattern, and hopefully that's something that people can now understand, that this is not a one-off case.
No, and I worked for the sheriff's office for over a year here in Beaufort County. And one of the things that the police chiefs and the sheriff here had an issue with is that you have these crimes that are violent, like murder. You have crimes that include, unlawful carry, pointing and presenting, anything with a handgun. You're seeing guys, get off. They've got a stack of charges. They're getting off on bond after bond after bond, and then recommitting or getting accused again of another crime while out on bond. And it's not working, because it's not only putting the community at risk, it's putting law enforcement officers at risk. Like, it's creating a whole ecosystem of problems. And I don't know that, it's great for judges to have these philosophies, and yes, you are innocent, and yes, they have to look at, are you going to commit another crime? Are you going to be a flight risk? But at what point do you say, this person's committed, they're now stand accused of X number of charges, and I'm going to let them out on a light bond again? Yeah, I don't know.